Perhaps there's no chord more important to the sound of jazz than the dominant 7th chord. And this chord right here, B flat 7, it's the 5 chord in E flat major. Its whole purpose is to create tension that resolves satisfyingly back to the home key of E flat. Now, most of us are probably familiar with this 5-1 progression already, but it's one of only 4 different pathways that a dominant chord could resolve. If you really want to play authentic jazz, you need to understand all 4 pathways. This is a sound that we've heard a million times, right? It's in basically every song ever written, every jazz standard you've ever wanted to play. It's a dominant 7 chord that wants to resolve down 5 notes. Now that 5 chord is enough to walk the pathway, but to really extend the length of it and make it more interesting, we can lead into that 5 chord with more chords in front of it. The 2 chord being the classic choice, creating a 2-5-1. Now if we shift ourselves away from the key of E flat here into the key of D flat major, we start walking pathway number 1 right from the beginning of Pure Imagination. In fact, the whole A section is basically just walking the pathway. Let me show you. We start on the 2 chord, E flat minor, and then we go to the 5, right? And that 5 is going to resolve down 5 notes to D flat. Then we do it again. The E flat is the 2 chord to the 5. And then back to the 1. There's a little fake out here, but that's all right. We're right there back at home. So you have to know pathway number 1 in all your major and minor keys because you encounter it in literally every song that you ever play. But next we're going to talk about pathway number 2, which was Bill Evans' favorite. So let's come back here to the key of E flat to talk about pathway number 2. See, pathway number 2 is the same as pathway number 1, except that we've changed the bass note. Let me just show it to you in practice first. So on pathway number 1, we had a B flat 7 that went down 5 notes to E flat. All we're going to do is change the bass note. Instead of playing B flat in the bass, we're going to play E. That's a half step above our target note. You can hear how that half step really wants to resolve down. Now we could think about this as B flat 7 with an E in the bass like this, but if we recontextualize this to put E as the root and play these notes, you can see this is actually an E7 chord. So our first colorful change is that we end up with a lot of chromatic bass line movements. So in pathway number 1, we would play these 2-5-1s, right? F minor to B flat 7 to E flat. Now if we replace that B flat with the E, we get F minor to E, which is down a half step in the bass, to E flat, which is down another half step in the bass. Now the real magic and color of pathway number 2 comes alive when we start extending our dominant chords. So let's take our pathway number 1 B flat 7 chord, and let's play, instead of just 3 and 7, A flat and D, let's put a C in there, that's the 9th, and let's put a G, that's the 13. And we get this really nice B flat 13 dominant chord. Now if we change our bass note to E and leave everything else the same, and now this C, that's the flat 13, and the G is the sharp 9. So those 2 extensions that we made on the B flat chord, when we switch the context to be E7, they're both altered notes. And so it becomes a little bit gnarlier, a little bit more tense, a little bit cooler than where we were before. Now you're going to find these tritone substitutions all over the tunes that you play. I like this one called Emily from the film The Americanization of Emily. And the move happens right here on this B flat 7. B flat 7 is a dominant chord, and if you look at the next chord, it resolves down a half step to A major 7. Our next pathway is one of my favorites, but it's going to take a little bit more for us to get our head around this one. So pathway 1 and 2 were pretty similar, right? They were both coming from basically the same place. We were just changing that one bass note. But when we get here to path number 3, we're coming from an entirely different direction, from below and resolving upwards. In this case, resolving from a whole step below into our home key. So let's switch our key up here for a second. I think it'll be a little easier to understand here in the key of F. Now, if we're arriving at F from a whole step below, that's going to be E flat. And so right away, this is a big change, right? E flat is not in the scale of F major. E natural is. So we're coming from completely outside the scale already. Now you notice that the voice leading from this is not as compelling as it was coming from the other direction. One of the ways that we compensate for that is by playing a backdoor 2-5, which is, we're just gonna walk the path a little bit longer. We're gonna insert another chord in front of this E flat 7. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna think about this E flat 7 as a 5. Now obviously in the key of F, E flat is not a 5, but we're gonna pretend that it's a 5. And if E flat was the 5, we have to think, what would its 2 chord be? We go down to find it. 5, 4, 3, 2, B flat minor. So we have 2, 5, and then the backdoor up to F. The backdoor 2-5 doesn't get as much love as other progressions, and I think that's a real shame because it's so useful and we run into it all the time in our jazz standards. Right here in Georgia on My Mind, right? B flat minor, E flat 7, and where does it go? Up a whole step to F. If you take the time to really master these, this can be a really profound moment for you. Let's take pathway 1. We're in F major. We're gonna do 2, 5, 1. Totally inside, very standard. Now let's listen to it coming from the other direction on pathway 3. The back door is kind of uplifting, and the irregular one kind of closes in a little bit. Opens, the sky opens up, and this one, everything kind of closes down. I find that so interesting. And you can combine them both into the same progression. Maybe you do F major, but make it F7. Now F7 is the 5 chord of B flat. We'll make it B flat minor and come at it from below. So we've mixed pathway 1 and pathway 3. F to F7, B flat minor, E flat 7, F. We've got one more pathway we've got to learn, and nobody talks about this one, and I don't know why, because we run into it everywhere. My friends over at Open Studio call it the screen door. It comes in from below, but in this case only by a half step. Now 99% of the time that I see pathway number 4, it's used to target major chords. So here in the key of C, that would be our 1 chord of C major or our 4 chord of F. We're coming from a half step below, so if we're aiming for C, we're going to be approaching it from a B7. And at first it might sound a little bit strange because it's really far outside, but 3 of our notes are resolving by a half step. Now, just like we did with the back door, we could spend more time just walking the path. If we spend more time on the path, it'll be easier for our listeners to follow us. Maybe we put a 2 in front of it, a 2-5. And that really helps give some momentum to land the resolution. And one really famous tune that does this is called It Could Happen to You. And it happens right at the end of the first line. Right here, F sharp to B7 into C. So there's a really famous tune that uses this move to go to the 1 chord, but there's another one, super famous, that goes to the 4. All right, so Someday My Prince Will Come is in the key of B flat. Okay, we start right on the 1 chord, and then this move, the screen door, happens on measure 2. This D7. D7 is the 3 in the key of B flat, but it's moving up to the 4, up a half step. Now, up to this point, we've been thinking about our destination first. When we think about a target key, like F, we can use any of these 4 pathways to get us there. Another way that we could look at this is to take an individual dominant chord and realize that that dominant chord exists on all 4 paths too, but that's going to give us different destinations. Let's look at C7. If we think about C7 on path 1, it's going to take us down a 5th and end us in F major. If we think about C7 on pathway 2, it's going to take us down a half step and end in B major. If we think about C7 on pathway 3, the back door, it's going to take us up a whole step into D. And if we think about C7 on pathway 4, we're going to go up a half step into D flat. So when you use this with your own music, you can decide either like, I want to take this dominant chord that's written in the sheet, but I want to substitute it to come down a different pathway, to change the dominant chord to a different dominant that's going to walk a different path to get us to the same target. Or you could decide you want to leave that dominant chord where it is, but then change your destination, change the next chord and go in a different direction. So it's a great way to kind of modulate, change keys, introduce some other colors. So to keep going with this, you're going to need to know some really nice voicings for these dominants. So I'm going to suggest that you watch this video next.